Hello, welcome back to the Currency Podcast. This is your definitive answer for all currency. You'll find flowing streams of revenue will befall you in your life after you listen to me. I have all the answers, and you're welcome. So you arrived at the right place, and welcome to Team Currency Podcast. You're on my team now, and we're all on the same team. We're all in the same boat. And now, so I guess if we're on the team and that's working out that way, then I got to lead you in some particular direction or something. I don't know if that's going to happen, but so that there's a direction that I'm headed. I mean, I'm just so wild that I'm not going in any direction. I'm so rogue and unpredictable that there's nothing that I was up to at any point. And so I'm just so unpredictable that, like, so encrypted that you'll never get to the root of what I was doing. And so much money as a result of the undefinability of this podcast. But that's what that's what currency is all about. The thing is that I wish that I was more practical. I could implement some better ways of making money, but it's not really like, it's just that I'm not trying hard enough, or saying that I can't do these things that like pretty much anybody could do. I'm talking about maybe I advertise my podcast better than I've advertised it to this point, or it's not like I'm not making an effort. I think that it's easy advertisement to keep making episodes. I'm talking about making money or something. But it's not all about making money. It's about art. This is about art here. This is the art podcast for fans of art. Go deep into the artistic realm. If you want to, then maybe you arrived at the right place. You did arrive at the right place. This is a brand, and that's when you know it's a brand, is the people who created it are telling you, hey, this is a brand. And then you're like, oh, wow, I totally doing that now. I'm going to make room for more of that in my life. They're saying this is a brand. I'm going to drop everything that I'm up to right now and then go to the place where the brand is, where there's somebody is saying that there's a brand, because how would I know? That's what you're thinking. How would I know in a world of so many brands what brand to follow besides the one that's saying, hey, we're a brand over here? But I'm telling you, hey, this is money, I guess. So now I'm laying out why I'm doing this podcast for the first time, only how many episodes in. I mean, I'm just so wild and unpredictable. You don't ever know. Whoa. Who knows what's going to come next? And things are just so shocking over at this podcast that you'll basically you'll lose your bearings just upon listening. Like if you're driving in your car and listening, you should probably pull over, because the unpredictability is going to reach you and cause you to pull into oncoming traffic. I hope that doesn't throw you off. I hope that doesn't mean that you stop listening. The greater risk that's involved, I hope that doesn't cause you to think that you shouldn't listen just because the potency might influence you to do drastic things. But this is a brand here, and this is dollars and cents. And when it comes down to brass tacks, when you get down to the bottom line, whose signature is on it? I don't know. Probably God's. God signs in blood. He signs God. When he signs it, then you know that it was God. If it was in blood, it was possibly God. If it wasn't in blood, now I don't know what I'm talking about. So, like, let's see if I can lose people before I start talking about the very important thing that I'm going to talk about today. I want to talk about, and I'm going to vote for talking about this, and vote by talking about it. By talking about it, I'm throwing my hat into the ring. I'm throwing my vote into the world for the thing that I'm about to say. and I'm voting for it. I'm trying to make it more popular. I'm voting for it to be a popular thing that other people talk about by bringing it up. But that's what people do when they get they create a business and they're like, this is my enterprise. But like entrepreneurs and enterprises, that's what's important about enterprise, or that's why it's a significant word, is because it's like the creation of an entrepreneur. Basically, entrepreneur to enterprise is the same as creator to creation. So like the enterprise is the creation that gets entered into the contest, the worldwide contest of, you can open up a business and throw it into the ring, be like, and now you're competing. You're entering your model, your thing that you did. You're like, this is what I did, when you enter your enterprise as an entrepreneur, but entrepreneur. But I guess based on the way the entrepreneur is, you can't say enter. They didn't describe it originally as entrepreneur, and that's not on me, of course. I'm going to talk about the relationship between standards and life hacks. And if you brush your teeth while you're peeing, then you can save a few seconds. Or you know what I do is make coffee, but I don't stand there and watch the pot make it the entire time. And then I walk around and play video games. That's a life hack. You can actually brew coffee while you're playing video games. You can take a shower while breathing. Did you know that? That's a life hack. Try to do that next time. You might get to work sooner. Don't like TP somebody's house while filing your taxes. Just throwing out some life hacks. So let me get back on track, or back into the mode of speaking. I got thrown off for a second because I kind of have ADD or something. Let me tell you something personal about my life. This is the personal things about my life is that I prefer to talk if I get to a place where I'm not even thinking about the words coming out of my mouth. Like, it would be kind of interesting to view yourself as just a vessel, and then you're just talking, and then whatever person is talking, it's like you can kind of throw yourself in the rear view mirror, be like, whatever, I don't care about the guy that brought me to this place that now I'm talking and speaking out of it, or like the physical body. I mean, if you really want to go insane, if you really want to be like out of reality, just picture that whatever is speaking through you isn't you. And then you can throw yourself under the bus. Be like, oh, fuck that guy that's talking. And that's what I'm telling you right now. This guy that's talking is like, that's not the point. I don't mean to represent him. I'm just tied to it so much that I am representing myself. Like, I'm not myself, but I do happen to be representing it based on physically. I can't separate myself from my physical body. But I'm just trying to overwhelm you with really stupid things that I'm saying. But to me, they're not really stupid. But it's like, I'm just trying to, I don't know, just trying to sabotage. But it's not. I mean, is it entertaining to you? It's not. I don't. Doesn't matter. I'm just trying to get to a place where I am saying words and not even thinking about it. Like I'm ignorant of whatever limitations I would limit myself, like, oh, don't say these words. But I'm just looking for a stream of speech that is unfiltered and uninhibited by myself at all. And maybe I have to talk for a while in order to make that happen. But now I'm taking you along for the ride. And what a journey, of course. This is like, I want to be speaking in a way that is like I'm driving a car. Like the car is going 70 miles an hour and not paying attention to anything that's going by. I want to be in the mode of car driving as a speaker, even though I'm sitting down. And the only way I can do that is if I ignore that I'm this physical person, and then I'm like, oh, talking, because you can talk at whatever rate you want, and in that sense, ignore whatever your physical limitations are. Like, I want to pretend, or I just want to have fun, you know, and usually faster is more fun. Not that that's a direct correlation, but speed, you know, if you go faster or whatever, that's not more fun for everybody, but I'd say it's more fun for me. People say I drive too fast, move too fast, live too fast. Ain't no such thing that's too fast for me. Have you heard that song? Let me talk about education. Education is about problem solving. You go into education, the education system makes a demon out of problems. The enemy in education, especially in mathematics, and I've done a lot of mathematics in education, but basically every class, what they demonize is a problem. They demonize problems, like problems are the enemy. You have to solve problems in a world that loves to have answers. Problems are the problem. So very much problems are the problem. Why are there so many answers? Why are there so many self-help people writing self-help books or pastors of churches? Everybody wants to have answers. Even the spiritualists, even people that do a bunch of drugs are like, drugs is the answer. Even Terence McKenna and Alan Watts are like philosophers are going to be like, this is the answer. You need to find peace, or like your thoughts aren't real, so don't think them, or like you find peace when you stop thinking. Like like thoughts are just illusions or something. Meditate and try not to think, because then you'll find peace. Like even the people that are above all of it, philosophers or whoever, are like, we have answers. Nobody cares about, I have problems, or like, nobody offers that. That's because it's not sexy and it's not going to make you any dollars. And, but like, the stereotype is that Generation Z is all anxiety, or they're like the feelings generation, or just people that are like 25 and younger, like feelings generation. And maybe that is not like, maybe the stereotype doesn't really help that much, or that's the whole problem with it, is that all of that shit has been criticized to be emotions or feelings for so long, as if it's supposed to be written off, that all of it gets brushed under the rug, which is what leads to all of that anxiety. The anxiety, I'd say, is a result of a grand lack of communication. I mean, that's what in my experience, it somewhat stems from. Anxiety and paranoia comes from lack of communication that I have, lack of connection that I get to have with people around me, and then I build up fear and somewhat irrational thinking towards people because of the distance, because in lieu of talking to them, then I'm filling in the blanks with my own thing, like as a result of not a great enough lack of communication. And then you can be a more sensitive person, and then it's kind of like you need more communication in order to quell you filling in the blanks or something. It's like, and we kind of would ignore somebody, or we try to write off and criticize people for being too sensitive, or like, don't be somebody who needs to talk a lot. You have to suck it up. You're just like, you too many feelings. But it's like, what results eventually is this has to be spoken by somebody, or some generation has to be characterized that way, or actually has to voice the problems with anxiety at some point, when you're just pushing it under for so long, probably for years and years or generations and generations. Like, it's better than a stereotype or something like, that generation is too emotional. It's better than that. It's actually like, this is a real problem, or maybe something that everybody has to admit to. If it's a big enough thing, I mean, it would only be that way if it was true. Like, if it was ubiquitous that people had anxiety. I know that not everybody has anxiety, but it's just maybe like a maligned enough subject that everybody who has had it for so long doesn't get to say anything about it. But it's kind of like, the more that you say it, though, it's just that what are you going to do as a world, as a group, as a whole group of humans? What are humans going to do at the point that they realize this is a problem? They have to get through it, right? I was watching Calabasas Fight Companion with Brendan Schaub and Chris D'Elia, and it's like they're talking about, or Chris D'Elia is talking about, because he has a son, they're talking about teaching their kids things, and like, well, they have to get through it, or like Crystalia was introducing his son to drinking coffee or at like age 1 or 2, and then Brendan Schaub and Crystalia were saying like they need to, yeah, well, we need to teach our kids this. They need to get through it at some point. Like he has to overcome coffee at some point because it will come up at some point in the future. But they're saying they're acting like this is a general rule for all things that would come up. Is like, well, they have to get through it. But that's, I mean, I guess that's what life is, or that's kind of what's going to determine your success rate, how much success you have is like how much you're willing to get through or overcome or go past when it does present itself. And like anxiety is something now that presents itself for the individual that is like the entire world or like all of America. And I guess we probably have to get through it now that, but you see that it is coming up, that it is presenting itself because it is spoken so much, or it's like, it seems to be everywhere that this is a thing that people are talking about, like, oh, we have anxiety. And what are you going to do? How do you not make that part of your story or like your like characteristics? How do you not make that part of your character at the point that it does present itself, especially when the world is always moving and we're always having more kids, new generations are coming. And so because we're still growing and people are still being born, things are still new, and new things are being invented and discovered, and whatever is being revealed. Like there's it changes. What I'm saying, the story does change, and it's just that now, like when that comes up a lot, then you're enveloped by anxiety, like a problem, like it's more in the air, like we are under the spell of it. But and so you would think that that's a worse thing. We head in that direction. You don't want everybody to think that they have paranoia. It's kind of like the more that people speak about it is the more that everybody has to be under the spell of that or stuck underneath it. But it's kind of just something that you have to get through, and then we overcome it and get to something else. But you have to talk about it because it is a problem, or like you can't ignore it forever or whatever. And it's too bad that some generations have to deal with the shitty things while other generations live in euphoria or happiness land, pretending that nothing is wrong. I guess that's kind of the stereotype about boomers, or we're like, yeah, well, you guys have just acted like everything has been utopia, or like everything's great for too long, like everything, like too many poses and appearances shit and smiling at each other and looking good in order to be sociable or look like you have friends and look like you made the right choices. Like I feel like maybe it's a stereotype that boomers have done that for too long and ignored problems, but you'd have to say that that's somewhat true because they look at the political system that they've left us with and all the division and anger and vitriol that comes with all of that, the divide between Republicans and Democrats, and how much that becomes this big battle royale, and everybody becomes divided as a result, and just the political system and the government is kind of just a shit show. And this, like, you could blame boomers for that, for reading so much belief and faith into the perception of the election and presidency, or but it's like I mean, it's been sold to them by the media that was popular to them, by the media that they've come to identify themselves to, like cable TV or whatever. But I wanted to talk about the cross of Jesus Christ, the cross that he's on. The cross is everywhere. I looked it up, and there are 2.3 billion people that are Christians, and and I wanted to determine how many people go to, I wanted to determine how many Christian churches there are. And so I figured that, let's say only 1 billion of those 2.3 billion go to church. I don't know if that's an overestimation or an underestimation. Even if there were 500 people per church from that point on, where it's like 500 is an overestimate, and so you'd end up with like less churches probably than there actually are. Even if there are 500 people per church for the 1 billion of the 2.3 billion that went to church, then you'd still have 2 million churches. And so it's like there's 2 million churches, or at least I'm kind of looking for buildings that have a cross on them. And so it's like, even besides churches, there's a lot of schools and whatever that have crosses on them. There's maybe 2 million buildings that have crosses on them, but there's definitely more than 39,000. And there's 39,000 McDonald's in the world. And so there's a lot more there's a lot more buildings in the world that have the cross on them than a McDonald's. And as far as I know, I mean, maybe Starbucks has more than McDonald's, but I'm making the point that there's more, as far as images are concerned and symbols, there are more Christian churches, there are more buildings with crosses on them than there are buildings with golden arches. But the cross is basically the best brand in the entire world. And it's kind of unique from other religions. Like I know Islam has the crescent moon, but like the cross is probably the most dominating image for in terms of religions. It's like kind of, I guess all the religions have their biggest image. Like Judaism has the six-pointed star, as far as I know, right? Yeah, that's true. But I think that, well, there's more Christians actually than there are any other religion. Christianity is the most adherents to that religion more than any other one, and Christianity is the most visible religion in the world. But it's almost like the world makes itself Christian. Like I think the world doesn't recognize how much it, like the number that I saw, and Google freely gives this information, that there are more Christians than any other religion, and they make up 31% of the world population. That's an enormous number. I had no idea it was that high, but it's almost like the world is Christian, and you consider that that's the most people practice that religion. There's crosses everywhere. The cross is the best brand in the world. It's better than McDonald's. There's more, you see the cross everywhere, but it's like they were a brand before branding was a thing, is what makes it even better. The cross is better than, Christianity is better than McDonald's. Christianity has lasted so much longer than McDonald's. But it's like McDonald's started as the result of a vision of a handful of people, but there's that movie, The Founder, about the guy who really had the vision to franchise it and really made McDonald's what it was. It's kind of like the result, as you would see in that movie, based on how much you believe that guy, like that movie portrays it accurately. That McDonald's and its power and influence today is the result of the vision of one guy. And Christianity is the result of the vision of, it's the result of the vision of one guy, of Jesus. And Jesus as an individual is so much more powerful than any other brand that's ever come along. Even McDonald's, there's 39,000 of them. McDonald's will probably be done with in 100 years. You don't know that about Christianity. Christianity's already lasted like however more than 1,000 years longer than McDonald's has. And I'm just talking about, like, if this was a dream, if the world was one giant dream, like if this was a dream sequence, or you allowed yourself to think of it that way, the cross is such a reoccurring symbol that you would have to try to work out. You would want to interpret what it meant, especially that this is a worldwide thing. It applies to everybody in the world, and especially that we're on Jesus's timeline. Everybody in the world is, and that goes hand in hand, in my opinion. But it's like, this is an apparent, obvious thing, especially when you understand, like, you would have to think that the cross itself, what is the importance of that? And it's a pretty apparent and obvious correlation between Jesus and the cross. But it's like all of time is centered around this zero. And I know that they changed the name to like AD, they changed the name to CE or something, where they're like, maybe Christ isn't in the name, but still it's still all centered around this zero. And the zero, the before Christ and then the after Christ, is centered around this zero. And the zero, what else would you say that represents besides, well, that's when Jesus came, and that's what we're setting all of time by. And it's a thing where, so we're setting all of time by that. And basically when you cross into a new era, like the post 9/11 era, once 9/11 happens, the buildings fall. America crosses into the post 9/11 era, and there's no going back to the whatever kinds of freedoms we enjoyed before that, or the way things were before that. We go into the 9/11 era, and that's a new era. But like any artist that comes along, like Lady Gaga, makes it big, and then we enter into the Lady Gaga era of music, and then like music is never the same after that, and you don't know all whatever ways she's influenced the entire landscape of music. But any genre does that. Like you cross over to a new era or a new genre where these themes in music became the thing, and it could be the result of the influence of one people or a number of people. But like any era, we cross over into a new era. That's a crossing. And crossings, I make this point to say that a crossing is kind of is representative of a point in time, but time is like, I'd like to make the point that time is vertical rather than horizontal. But people say this, that time isn't linear. It's almost like saying time isn't horizontal, it's vertical. But we happen to live on one person's timeline. That's Jesus's. And because of that, we're all in one. Time is linear, but like people who are smarter or whatever, people are trying to describe, well, time is actually more complicated than that it is linear. That's the thing that people are always saying as a jumping off point to stop perceiving time to be linear. We're like, we need to get off of the linear standard or thinking that it is linear. So people are often saying time isn't linear, and it's like linear is just an adjective for line-like, and it sounds like a more advanced word than that, but it's just a line-ish. And it's like horizontal, but time is linear the way that we're living, as much as you'd say it isn't. The way that we're living currently, it is linear because everybody is on one timeline, and we set it by that timeline, and where like points of time that happen within it all happen within this one timeline under one name. That name is like, it's Jesus's timeline. And it doesn't matter how big you make it, you're still a sub-timeline within the timeline of Jesus. The way that we set time currently, time is always linear as long as it is that, because that's what makes it linear, is making it one person's timeline. When it's like everybody is living different lives, all of these timelines through the eyes of all these different people or even organizations. Timeline, like the era of when iPhones became a thing as a result of Apple, like Apple's timeline and their influence. The Apple era is an era all its own. The information age is an era. Like all of these eras, we are putting as sub-eras within the era of this one guy. So time is always linear as long as that's the case, rather than recognize the verticality of time. If you recognize that, then you're getting off of the standard of thinking it's linear. But I'm talking about, like I was describing in the previous episode, that a person is like a steak through layers of horizontal strata. And I think a better description of this steak idea is that that's what time does. It's vertical. It's like time is the vertical steak because it's only a point in time that allows you to understand a steak through lots of horizontal eras that are happening at once, where each eras are different strata. But like horizontal, I mean, like a point in time acts as a vertical stake that goes through a number of eras. That's the only way you get to point out how all of those eras coexist. Like it's only when you recognize a point in time, like 2021, June 9th, 2021, that is a point in time that acts as a stake through all of the things that were happening, all of the eras, all of the people that have timelines during that. It's the point of time that acts as a vertical stake through every one of those layers of strata, all ideologies, belief systems, things that are popular, whatever, anything that's happening, companies that have a lifespan like Starbucks or anything that's going on during that time. Like the era of Starbucks happened during June 9th, 2021. That point in time acts as a stake through all those vertical, through all those horizontal layers of strata. But it's like, that's what time allows you to do. It's almost like a technology that's its function. It allows you to understand how things exist vertically, but it's really like you see how all of these eras are coexisting across all these people or all these companies as individuals or all these countries or cryptocurrencies or anything. You see that a point in time tells you that this is the point at which only all of these things coexisted. So it emphasizes coexistence, um, does a point in time, but like I'm saying that I'm saying that time is parallel rather than like there's all these eras that are happening parallel to each other. And that's what people mean when they say time isn't linear. There isn't one era, there's all these eras, but time points this out by acting as a stake that shows you the coexistence of all of them. Rather, it's time is meant to point out a coexistence of lots of eras, not just one era, not just one line, not just one timeline. But time is always linear as long as we understand it to be what it is currently. But basically, we live under this subjugation of Christ. No matter what you do, it's always a sub era within this one era because and I would say that that is it's something like superstitious, but it's just a reliance on that way of living for safety. And it's always been that way. It's kind of like relying on connectivity. Like we all have to be connected under one thing, like one safe realm of thinking where everybody has the same one, or everybody has one collective story. Like, there's a lot of discrimination against hate because people don't understand hate. There's a lot of like everything has to be love, or everything has to be like you should trend toward trying to connect with more people or something, even though this just happens on the surface. Like it's very one dimensional to make everything about love rather than recognize the place of hate, or say that love is what saves everybody and hate is not what saves everybody. Like when Germany genocides the Jews, they kill 6 million of them. They're really only able to do that out of love for themselves and love for the German cause. Like when Germany gets it in their head that, well, we need to establish the 1,000-year reign of Germany for the good of the German people, and then they actually further that cause by going to war, and then thousands and thousands of people die. That only happens as a result of love for Germany, love for themselves and their cause. You would almost be able to say it's more because of love than it is because of hate. Like, yeah, maybe they hate the people around them. It's kind of more like they start doing that though because of their unity and connectivity and love that they have for each other. That they're like, we are so important. We're going to establish a 1,000-year reign. It's really like tribalism. How do you have tribalism without love? It's really like the tribes that do the best are actually the tribes that are the most united and connected behind their idea. The tribes that love themselves the most are the tribes that win the most. Like, I said that love is the father of tribalism, and that's an original quote. And you can do whatever with that original quote. You can shove it up your ass, or anything, or you can rearrange the words in a word jumble. Be like this. It's up to you because now you can have it. Take it like it's your own. Tell somebody that statement and be like, that's an original quote. You can do that. I give you the liberty to do that, but just recognize that the immutability of that is already, I already recorded it and I'm already putting this on the internet. And so that's not the most immutable thing. It would be more immutable if I tied this file to a blockchain. But there's immutability, there's greater immutability in the world as time goes on because having to do with people's stories, like the Joe Rogan podcast. If Joe Rogan has somebody on and he says a story and then his guest says a story, they exchange stories. Either of them could go out into the world and say, like, they could take each other's story and retell it as if it was their own, but it's more difficult to do that now, today, for everybody because of the digital age, because you can trace transactions, like transaction of stories more so because more things are recorded, or like you can trace where that story came from, be like a podcast where two people are talking this and it's recorded. Now you can tie that story to two people. You can trace where stories came from, And this didn't used to be the case. Like 1,000 years ago, when nothing was recorded, it would have been a lot easier for anybody to take a story and then retell it as if it was their own. And then this leads to more mythical stories themselves, like things become legend because, and more mythical because of the mutability or the changeability, variability of a story, like that it could be changed. It becomes a lot, like 1,000 years ago, it would have been a lot more difficult to tie the story back to a person because how is that provable? And so stories used to be more mutable, and then like that results in more myth. But when everything's recorded, you can see where the story came from or whatever. You can, like, more information is out there, you can figure out the origin of something. But it's just that as time goes on, we create technology that makes things more immutable. Immutability increases as time goes on. Like with cryptocurrency, what you have then are banks and companies' ways of filing money that are more immutable than what we used to have. And so the thing is that you wouldn't really know why that was better. Why is it better that all of these transactions are permanently on a blockchain? Why is permanence better? Because that's the argument. It's like, well, cryptocurrency is so much better because of decentralization and because of immutability, because the transactions are all permanent. What's important about it is that with something like Ethereum, all of the transactions are permanent and they're all under one name, and then the company is distributed amongst all of the users of it. That's like exchanged peer-to-peer rather than all of the transactions that happen within the U.S. economy as managed or regulated by the United States government. Those transactions are somewhat immutable, but they're not as immutable as a blockchain that permanently locks all transactions into a program, a computer program that's written where the program is unchangeable. It's a program that is visible and exchangeable by everybody, is the code that was written to create Ethereum. And that code causes for all transactions to be under one name. It's important they're all under one title, but it's basically like, this is relatively better than national governments because, like, the U.S. government is more mutable. You don't know what conclusion they're going to arrive at in order to manage their money. All of the money is regulated across all these departments at different levels where different people have the option who aren't you. They have the option and they hover over the process to do what they want. And like the Federal Reserve can change the whatever. Like Yellen can change the rate of interest whenever she wants for like banking. And I mean, it's controlled, it's regulated by all these people that get to decide. And so it can be changed. The currency, it's just relatively more changeable, but especially when you go to Target and make a transaction and there's a receipt for that. So it's like, it's relatively known, or you can go back and be like, oh, this transaction is permanent somewhere. It's just that it's not all under one name. And so all permanence all under one name, one blockchain is better. It's more immutable because Target has the ability within themselves to, like, they might lose the history of the transaction, but it's like, it's not all under one name. It's like too many different levels that there's so many different people that would be able to change the history of the transaction that makes it more changeable, or you might lose what actually happened. Like, it's harder to trace it. It's a lot easier to trace it when it's all under one computer and the computer is filing everything. And it's like, and when a transaction happens. But anyways, this is boring. This is boring that I'm talking about. I'm just making the point that immutability is it used to be at a premium historically as we developed as humans. There were not technologies that were immutable. However, the Christian church, in lasting for 2,000 years, offered this unique level of immutability because of the branding of it, basically, or like because of how many people were involved with it, because of the strength of the Bible, or like a book is actually one of these things that is a technology that offers immutability that is kind of rare. And so we used to have to rely more on a book in terms of people needed something immutable that they could center all of their stories on, or like that they're staking their reputation in, because of safety or survival. It's more difficult to survive, or like people need something to trust. And because things have gotten more immutable over time, you can trust the thing that you're putting money in more over time. And like, because it was more difficult to, like, when it's more the Wild West, you can't trust people, or you need to have a gang around you, or you need to form a tribe. When things are less trustworthy, like they were 1,000 years ago, when things couldn't be recorded and things weren't permanent and everything was more mutable, you needed, like, you would have relied more on a religion. It's really like Christianity is the best one in the game for that, because of you see the immutability of the cross, how long that's lasted, and everybody on one timeline. That's like that's a kind of immutability that the world would have needed to rely on. But this is just like we have come up with, in lieu of having technology that makes all of your transactions, all of your currency more immutable and permanent. You can trust where it's going. So it's like the United States government comes along and it offers a relatively higher level of immutability than what used to exist in other countries in the world, because its system was better and you could trust the US dollar more. And because because the United States as a country came up with the best system, as a result of that, over the years, it became the reserve currency, or the currency that the most people have on hand. And that's because the world perceives the United States to be the most immutable. But like, the United States has the highest standard, and more immutability is better because of the standard. Because it's kind of hard to say why it's better. It's just that it's more successful. It will make more money. And that's what cryptocurrencies, being enterprises that are all about collecting money. More immutability makes you more money because better standards make you more money. For example, and the best one of those is the Christian church, but like look at the standard of time is all on one of them. That's an incredibly centralized thing that we're living under. And like, when you look at the world around you, you see how decentralized things are. Any entrepreneur can enter any enterprise. How many different people are creating different timelines and influencing the world in different ways, but yet we're all on the standard of one time. But like, part of that is because of the collectivism of it offers people benefits and protections, and it has offered the entire world that for a very long time. And we've like relied on that level of immutability. But I'm saying like, more immutability is just more successful for some reason. It makes you more money. It's because the more immutable it is, the more it's a standard. Like the more it's a standard is the more it's unchanging, the more you can rely on it. Like it's the law, and that law is set in stone more the better that the standard is. Like Starbucks is a better standard than any other coffee shop, and they also happen to make the most money of any coffee shop in the world. It's because they have high standards, and like just how they make every individual item, it's always the same. You know what you're getting, but like that's a dependability that they've built up over time. Like they're really popular for one because you can rely on them to give you what the thing is more like. But better than that, for what I'm talking about, is just they are the standard, like the image. They have become the standard for coffee shops, and they make more money. That's just kind of an evident thing. It's like McDonald's has better standards than Burger King. That's why they become so successful. But I'm sort of just talking about branding practices. McDonald's is a better brand. They're a better standard for fast food. They are the standard for fast food. That's the way it's perceived. That's the way it's talked about. Intangibles that go along with the brand. Starbucks is the standard for coffee shops. Then they make the most money. The one that is the standard, but it's like, that's what immutability is. And the more that it's immutable, because that's an unchanging, that's what you're talking about, is the reliance that you have on it being the standard. And a lot of that is just everybody perceives it to be the best. And so there's people that are like, well, Burger King's better, but they're just an alternative perception in terms of saying which one is the standard. I guess there's people that would say Burger King is the best, And then in some senses, those are people that say that that is the standard of fast food, but those people aren't in the majority. So the standard is McDonald's. That's the way it's perceived and shared, and that's the way people talk about it. That's the way it's exchanged across groups of people, and it's like usually, and the standard ends up a lot of times that's like the one that has the most buildings or restaurants. But like the Christian church is even better than any company that's ever been made in terms of wealth and popularity, adherence to its religion, and time that it's lasted. And there's more buildings with a cross on them than there are golden arches. And also the Christian church, um, I mean, they've made a lot more money through the centuries, a lot more money to last that long than McDonald's ever has. And at the same time as that, that's the best brand. That's the thing you see the most in the world is crosses. At the same time, all of that, we're all under Christ's timeline. And so the most people are doing Christ. It's almost like the world is Christ. It's like, if there was one thing that you could define the world by, it's Jesus, because of how much Jesus that there is. But this is like, people say that religion is the problem, and I would tend to agree with that. But the thing is that you can't just say, oh, that's a problem, and then forget about it. Because there's a lot of people that get scientific and they're like, oh, those religious nuts. Like, once we realize that religion is stupid, then we can evolve. It's really not that. It's more that religion is this thing that's out in the open in front of everybody's face. And it's like, people aren't really doing a lot to try to figure this out. Like, people aren't really talking about Jesus or whatever this thing is. Like, this is kind of like a problem that would need to be solved. Why is everybody doing all this Jesus, and why are we living on Jesus's timeline? Like, people should probably be more freaked out about this. And I was watching the most recent episode of Jordan Peterson on Joe Rogan's podcast. Like, I was talking about it in another episode, and what I was referring to is the most recent time that Jordan Peterson was on, which was like a couple weeks ago on Joe Rogan. And Jordan Peterson was talking about how the Bible is, for a long time, it was the only book. And I've been on this podcast, I'm explaining similar things. And Jordan Peterson was like, I realized in this past week, or I realized recently, like, the influence of the Bible. And I just wanted to point out that I realized how inseparable the world is from the Bible before Jordan Peterson is. And so I'm more in tune with the prevailing perceptions that are swirling around in the atmosphere. I'm more sensitive to the trends in the world than Jordan Peterson is. I'm just like a little bit ahead of the game, but he's an old man, so like, of course he's a little bit lagging behind. That's all right. So it's like, if you wanted news, you'd probably need to go to me first, because it's probably like Jordan Peterson would get it after I would. It's really like, he was probably watching my podcast and then got that information, because it's really like, that's nice that he arrived at that, but like, he's not like that great, because of, but anyway, I'm just, I'm being somewhat humorous, but not that humorous. And if I keep going, it will be unattractively humorous. And the humorous is that bone in your arm, and it's this one. It's your bone that's below your shoulder, I think. Or is it in your leg? No, I think the humor is in your arm. And so that's information that you will get some other places, but not alongside all the other information that you got today. So would you call it information? Do you feel informed by this? Am I informing you? By the way, this is information. It's misinformation and information. But I'm talking about the immutability of the Christian church. It's immutable for those reasons. It's the best standard, and it's actually the most successful, and that just goes hand in hand with the visibility of there's tons of crosses in the world, but it's the most visible religion through the ages. It's like it's the best religion that the world has to offer, and it's the most visible when when the settlers come over to the Americas and they steamroll over all of the Native Americans that were here in the name of the cross, and it's coincidentally they cross the ocean to bring the cross over, and like the Crusaders are doing that in the name of, like, that's a word that comes from, like, they're cross spreading, the people who crusaded. They're doing it in the name of furthering the cause of the cross, and like they cross the ocean to spread the cross to everybody in the Americas, make a new world of cross worshipers, people who follow the cross, but like that's always the symbol that goes along with it. And it just so happens that the era is all based on a cross, like this giant timeline that we're in, that's Christ, is centered around basically when Christ came and died on a cross, but that is also the cross, or the important crossing, like that's the era that we're living in, that is the cross, of course. And it just so happens that there is only one. When people think of a cross, there's actually one cross that has risen above all the other ones, in terms of like, there's no era that we cross into that's like better than the era that's based around the one cross. Like, it's almost like there's a definitive, quintessential de facto cross, and there is, because you're like, think of crosses, famous crosses. Everybody's like, oh, the Christian cross is kind of the best cross, but also there's only one era that is steamrolled over all other eras, in terms of like, what era are you going to remember? And it's like, when you cross into an era, that's a crossing that you make, but the era is centered around this 1-0, and that Jesus came, and like evidently currently, just as we are living in this era, there's all these crosses all over the world, but nobody really cares. But and then from the Christian perspective, they're like, they act like they're discriminated against. Like, when I was in the Christian church, there's from Christians and Protestants, well, especially Baptists, but there's this idea that they're discriminated against, but it's more just like Christians are very sensitive to anything in the media that sounds anti-Christian, and the world is afraid of antichrists or anti-Christian, but Christians are afraid of an antichrist, and anything that sounds anti-Christian, they're especially afraid and sensitive towards. So they're like, oh, is the antichrist coming? And whenever there's any form of anti-Christian sounding speech anywhere in the world, Christians are so sensitive to that they think that they're discriminated against by the rest of the world, and then they make shitty art, then they make shitty movies like God's Not Dead that say like, oh, we're discriminated against, or like they play up this drama like the world is singling them out or always trying to screw with them, and that comes through in the movies they make. Like, God's Not Dead is this movie that goes after secular professors in non-Christian universities, and then it sensationalizes them to be people that hate creation specifically, and are like always trying to deny the truth of the gospel, when in reality, professors at secular universities wouldn't give a shit if you wrote a paper on creationism in their science class. They'd be like, oh, okay, you believe that, whatever. They don't care about other people's beliefs. But Christianity kind of carries on with this myth that they're always being singled out when people are like putting forward evolution, as if everybody's always denying the truth of creation. It's really the case that people actually believe in evolution, and that as a result of that, they don't care about specific religions. It's more the case that people are walking on eggshells around Christians because they know how sensitive Christians are, and Christians are sensitive. They're like, it's a little bit like Jews. You can't criticize Christianity, especially not publicly or popularly. You can't consistently have that opinion, especially, you're not going to get anywhere, because the world, and obviously so, because the world is so Christian that, popularly speaking, it's easy to get the most amount of people against you by not talking about it. It's really the opposite of that. Christians are discriminated against because they have, through time, the most wealth and the most power and the most influence. And every president, like when you become the president, you have to say that you're Christian in the United States. At least it's been that way for a while, but at least since Reagan. But like, they really have the most power. But like the world that has needed that standard. But it's the same as, like, we live in a world where you always have home or safety. Like, the world wants to build up safety, and ends up discriminating against the hateful, because hate is a idea that embodies characteristics that are not unifying, and hate is more separating. Love is more connective. But like, it's a fear of, it's a world that's like, well, it all has to be love, that blames a genocide. Like, Christians coming over, they genocide the Native Americans in the name of spreading the cross, and what results is a Christian nation unified under the cross, unified under Christianity. Whereas with Native Americans, you had all these Native American religions that were completely eradicated and destroyed at the point that Christianity got exported and steamrolled over, because it was like a relatively better technology, relatively better way of unifying everybody. And it is that because of its standard, because of its level of immutability, and that eventually causes it to get the most territory, or be able to spread itself the best, where the most people are doing it. Like, it's so much better a standard that the Native American religions couldn't compete with it at all. And obviously, it's not just religion, it's like the technology. Like, Europeans had guns and Native Americans didn't, whatever, I know that. But like, it's unifying. It's like, it's more moral. It's very integrating. Jesus Christ is like, Christ, and the message of that is so integrating that all of our times are integrated in this one. And what that does to time is allow you to not be able to recognize it. And that's why we live in this era where we're always like, well, we don't understand time. We could understand it better if we could recognize the way that it was talking, or we listened to it when it was talking. Time communicates in times. It communicates in events. Singular ones. That's how it communicates, in these singular ones. But if you are not able to recognize or separate out single events, if the entire culture, the entire world is putting all of them under one time, uniformly, like chalking it all up to one excuse that takes all of the blame, which is what Christ is designed to do. So it's one excuse that takes all the blame for everybody. It's this high-ended standard, very immutable, in a world that hasn't had access to immutability, that's like provided. And it's the same as, like, you might hear that cities is an early invention. Like, people have relied on cities, or collectivizing their story in a city, for so long, because they've needed to. They've depended on that, because a city has more events happening. There's more places to go, and more places like bars, or anything, productions, anything you can do at night to further your story or have a story. There's more stories you can have in a city than out in the country. And there's like a collectivizing of stories that happens in any city. And then if you live in Tampa Bay, Florida, everybody in there is using Tampa Bay as the crutch, or like the thing that's unifying all of their stories, because all of it happened in Tampa Bay, and they're like, I'm from Tampa Bay. It's like Tampa Bay is the title that collects all of that, the thing that they rely on. But I'm just talking about, like, overarching structures that provide this very giant ass level of safety that everybody's in, because people think that they need safety. And that's like, if we didn't have the safety, or if everything wasn't about love, then the connecting that happens across all of that, then we would go to shit. Or it's like, we need that in order to survive. It's the same thing as, like, building up moms and dads to be this huge personas. Like, the separation there is ageist. It's critical of youth. where we build up moms and dads to be such a big deal, and then what results is moms and dads have a baby, and they're like, then at the point that they have a baby, they have all these societal obligations to take care of it or be like a major authority. I think it results in like parenting, I'd say, is more, it, at least in America currently, relies on a lot of dominance. Like the parents are expected to be dominant, and then they can't be your friend, and then it makes it so that we live in this culture where kids are treated to be very stupid or very below adults. Like it's a lack of recognition of intelligence to say that kids are very stupid, kids, or like make all kids the same. And that's kind of what we get into when we build up the idea of moms and dads to be such a thing. But we need to do that because like the more societal obligations we put on a mom and a dad to be this major authority is how much more immutable they're going to be in terms of an excuse or like a safe place to be, safe authority or person to look to be under the spell of. Like the more that we build up the figure, the persona of a mom and a dad, is the more that they're this giant structure, this big like expanded thing that you can perceive to be safe. Like the more that you think that your mom or dad has the authority is the more safe you're going to be under. But that they are more a standard, the more that the society builds them up to be a thing. That like the more that we're like, holy shit, moms are the greatest moms. That's the hardest job in the world. And like the culture just promotes all this. And like the more that we build that perception up, it's the same as just home, the idea of home itself having safety. Like, oh, you always go back to home. I'm talking about these like sort of major ideas that we would definitely overlook. Like you always go back to home, there needs to be home to be safe, or like you need to, it's the same as settling down and living in the same place for a very long time. You have the safety of that rather than allowing yourself to deviate off of this standard way of doing things where people like live with the same thing forever, live in the same city. If we live in a world where shit was moving around more, but we don't live in that world because we really haven't allowed ourselves to deviate from the rules very much, and like nations develop and the nation is stuck with the same territory. Like the empires that are all of the nations that exist in the world today those are not moving anywhere, and they're like rather than you had empires like cryptocurrencies, they're more digital, they're more like they're just peer-to-peer. They exist on computers, and those computers, they go global rather than that they're stuck to one territory, do cryptocurrencies. And because of that, what you have are empires that are just like in the air or can transfer, like the empire itself, like Ethereum, is just like being transferred all over the world. Like it's images being transported through television. Like it's images that appear on a screen, like they're in the air, like they're just transferred through sound waves or light waves or something. Like it's more that than it's sectioned to a physical set of buildings or physical territory. Empires now are decentralized, and as a result of that, what you see is a greater level of movement, and movement that, like, of empires, they're just fluid, they're liquid. Ethereum and all of the money that goes into it, rather than that you have a currency that's based on a single territory like Canada, and then like whatever, and then the money that they exchange in Canada, Canadian currency. Now you have currency that's everywhere, and at the same time is immutable. It's a very much better technology, but basically the immutability is it has to do with trust, like a greater level of trust. And the thing is that people don't trust cryptocurrencies now, but what they don't realize is that it is like permanent, it's objectively more trustworthy. It's just that the world has not yet arrived at that perception of understanding that that level of trust is so much better with that. And so I'm saying that there's like this level of immutability with cryptocurrencies, of like I'm just saying we're graduating to a world that is more that is more moving and more liquid and more fluid, and like maybe what goes along with that is people moving more, but basically in the future there would be less reliance on cities or you needing to collectivize a story and more people spreading out to different places, because in the digital age you don't have to go to physical locations to further your story. A lot of it happens online. Like anybody can record a podcast and see their collection of stories transacted permanently on the recordings from anywhere in the world. You don't have to go to a city anymore. Like things aren't reliant as much on collectivizing things and having the same standard as everybody else, because everybody furthers their cause from their own home more than they used to. Like it will continue to be that way because immutability is now like ubiquitous. We don't have to take the time to make it like this physical thing, because it's just in the air. But so like we've been relying on immutability and like the standard of the cross there, and I guess what I'm saying is like there's integrating instances of like maybe people don't realize how integrating the cross is, Jesus is, and Christianity is. It's like religion is a problem, and like I'm just talking about how if you really want to say time isn't linear, you're not gonna convince anybody of that as long as our existence is all under one time. Because it is all under one time, but so it's like you would need to decentralize that standard, but it's really like it's difficult to understand what time is or think about like the complexity of that when everybody is forced. Like you could be anybody, you could be Robin Williams and rise to a major level of celebrity where you're like America's hero, but it's kind of like that's what Christ is. Like Robin Williams almost rises to this level of Christ-likeness. Like his popularity is that of Christ, but it's like the media would build up Robin Williams to be this guy that you couldn't overcome that because he's the funniest guy ever. Nobody will ever be better. And then he kind of achieves this level of immutability where like you could rely on in terms of comedy. Like, oh, nobody will ever be better than that, or he's the standard. But even his timeline isn't longer than Christ's. Like, Christ is so much more magnificent than that even. Like, Christ is so much the standard that you can't overcome it. Like, it's harmful because of the comparison that always has to happen for everybody, because everybody lives and dies within this one guy, so you didn't rise above it. You're not better than that. You'll never have more influence than that. I'm saying we need to live in a world that doesn't, that recognizes times to be individual ones rather than chalks all of it up to one identity. That's just relatively more, it's like relatively more stupid, but people need to separate things out, destandardize shit, kinds of things I talk about sort of often, but more, I guess I'll have to expand that idea or think about what I'm trying to say with the cross. Like, it's this symbol but yeah, there's only one cross for some reason. Everyone knows the cross. Anyway, but so I did an hour, so that by rule means goodbye for now. Because of the rules. And so talk to you all later.